I am pleased to be here. First of all, I just want to thank you all for the support that you provide the Boys and Girls Club here. How many of y'all know Michelle, who is who runs the club here? Michelle is probably one of our strongest and best club directors that we have. I've had the chance to be over here a good bit, especially when you are providing lunch for the kids. So when they walk in, fill this place up, and you are providing lunch, that's a great and wonderful thing. A little bit about me. I guess I'm a hillbilly. I'll start there. I'm from East Tennessee. I tell people I was raised in the backdrop of the Great Smoky Mountains under the influence of St. Dolly Parton, and that's probably my best line that you'll hear from me today. Came out of the United Methodist Church, so I'm a cradle Methodist, which means I inherited my faith at a very young age. I had 4 uncles who were Baptist ministers and one great uncle who was a United Methodist pastor. And so grew up in the church in Arcadia, in Kingsport. Slowly migrated my way over to North Carolina in 1993 when I opened up an office for my business in Charlotte, and then just kept moving north until I ended up in Greensboro. I was in Greensboro for about 14 years, and then got tapped to a role in the Pacific Northwest, and so I spent about 10 years out in Seattle. And so I'm excited about who's going to win the Super Bowl today. Anybody know who's going to win the Super Bowl? Seahawks, that's right. That's right. And so I came back this direction in 2021 and worked bi-coastal for a while, and on an airplane about every other week. It's not a fun thing. I moved back to the area to be closer to my mother, who's in East Tennessee. I didn't want to be too close, so I came back to Greensboro and was recruited to lead an education nonprofit, which I did for about 3 years before I was recruited and tapped to be a part of the Boys and Girls Club. Now, what's unique about the Boys and Girls Club and my story is that I'm a club kid. In the mid 70s, I tripped and fell into a club primarily because I didn't like school at the time, but I was attracted to the clubs because of baseball, basketball, football. So anything that involved a ball, I was very interested in. And in my time there, I ran into a tutor who got me pointed in the right direction academically, which is incredibly important. And so that was a catalyst in my life. I attribute my time at the Boys Club at the time to being a first-generation college graduate. My interest kind of started to shift in terms of what would be valuable in terms of education, and I just fell in love with learning, and I think that all started at the Boys Club at a very early age. I also had the opportunity during that time to meet and be connected with kids who didn't go to the same school that I went to, and I probably wouldn't have never connected with them in the same way had I not been at the Boys Club. And I'm speaking of people of color. And so a bunch of my friends that I grew up with came out of the Boys Club and didn't go to the school that I went to. So that was an early intersection for me to understand that even though I was not from a well-to-do family, lower middle income, there were a lot of people that were in worse situations than myself and my family were in. And that began to open my eyes about things. I shifted my focus. I owned a business development marketing firm for about 16 years, and decided to go into the work full-time in social justice, in the social justice lane in the United Methodist Church. And started focusing specifically on what are the circumstances that families face that if I, as a white male, and someone who really started to understand my privilege, how could I leverage that in a manner that would create good in the communities that I was in? And so I did that work pretty specifically in connected to the United Methodist Church in the areas in which that I had the opportunity to serve. And what that looked like in community was affordable housing, social enterprise, economic and community development, housing, affordable housing, but homeless ministry, a bunch of those things that we would just recognize were needs in a specific community, and then try to rally around that with support and some structure to help nonprofits get off the ground. So that's been at the core of who I am. I want to figure out how do I take what I know and what I'm passionate about and kind of figure out how does that work within a community, and how can we create and cultivate change for folks who, in our understanding of the gospel, will be the least of these. And I ended up ultimately leaving the church because the church didn't move fast enough for me. So I just wanted to be clear about that. 21 years in the United Methodist Church was like pushing a boulder up a hill, and if you're not careful, it's going to roll back on you. And I think that I could say pretty confidently, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've probably been a part of more measurable change in community than I was in the previous 21 years, probably 35 years in connected to the church. And so I just want you all to hear that, because you're in a unique position to make a decision. Okay, where do we want to go as a church when you're especially evaluating and thinking about leadership and opportunities in the community in which you find yourself. Now, I'll shift gears to the Boys and Girls Club, if that's okay. I came on board, as Tom mentioned, in June 2nd of this past year, and inherited some things that were changing in the organization. And at the same time, the Boys and Girls Club of America had approached the club and asked them to consider expanding across the triad. If you're not familiar, Boys and Girls Club in this area, particularly in North Carolina, South Carolina, and part of Georgia, was tied to the Salvation Army, which means the Salvation Army would get territories, and in the Salvation Army, if you think about it as a pie, they did many programs, and one slice of that pie was youth development through Boys and Girls Club program. So it was 1960 when that relationship first began. And the Boys and Girls Club of America determined that we weren't serving as many kids and youth as we had the opportunity to serve in those particular territories, and decided to end that relationship with the Salvation Army January 1 of 2025. So just over a year ago, that relationship ended. And what that meant in North Carolina, there were no longer any Boys and Girls Clubs in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Thomasville, Kernersville, Charlotte, Asheville, you name it. The biggest concentration in North Carolina was in Raleigh and toward that area east. So the High Point Club, in their infinite wisdom, in 1998 decided to separate from the Salvation Army a long time ago. I don't know if you may have known that. So they have been operating as an independent club for almost, as Tom said, almost 30 years right now. That includes for us now, we have 5 clubs in High Point, 6 if you count our teen center, and then we have a club in Asheboro. This club took over Asheboro in 2003 it was not, they were kind of sliding downhill and needed some help and assistance, so the clubs took that over. So imagine this, and this is kind of in the same situation in consideration that you are in. Our board had to go through a process of thinking, okay, what's going on? What needs do we have? How effective have we been? What can we be doing better? And for almost a year, they had an interim CEO. Now, I was recruited in the spring of last year and began getting word from various parties that BGCA wanted to expand the good work from High Point. But if you're on High Point side, it feels like everything's kind of been turned upside down because didn't have a CEO, had some programmatic issues and some other things that they needed to attend. And if you're not aware, we're just in the same situation you all are in. Do you all get income from anywhere besides the pockets that you have on your pants or anything like that? In other words, we provide free service to everyone in our community. And for every dollar that is spent providing that service, we have to raise that money. So there is no widgets that we make. It's like the church. You're not making widgets, although you make some wonderful soup, and that's really good. And so those are opportunities to kind of cultivate some giving. So we understand that background. When you're trying to expand across the region and you don't have a CEO, so you don't have the proper leadership, you don't have certainty and a vision and a direction, it kind of puts you in a position of anxiety. And you begin to start doing a little deep dive of what it looks like that we're trying to accomplish, what goals are we trying to meet. And that's what our board went through, much like many of you who are part of what's the title of the transition team here is doing. Thinking about, okay, who are we, what do we need to be concentrating in, how do we think of ourselves being right-sized, what are the specific needs, what can we afford to do, where should our focus be from a mission perspective. All those things are the same things that our board was going through in the Boys and Girls Club Greater High Point. So I came on board, and I'm a visionary. I don't have a whole lot of patience. Tom will tell you, Allison will tell you that I have zero patience. I like to see things get done and happen, and I like to look around the spaces that we're in and look at the resources that we have. And it's not just money, right? It's people resources, it's programming, it's the assets of buildings, it's the tools and knowledge that we have. All those things have to be brought into consideration when you're thinking about who your next leader is being. And it's my understanding, John, you do the interim piece professionally, so you've been through this process many, many times. I think it's incredibly important that you do that deep listening, not just internally and reflecting internally, but and not just having folks from the outside come in and speak. Like we consider ourselves a partner with you all, so I'm probably saying more things to you all than I would say to any other partner. We're kind of in this together in terms of reaching kids, and you've been doing that for a long, long time, and we really appreciate that. But I think it's also important for you to go out into the community in which you find yourself in and listen and discover and build relationships with who resides in this neighborhood, and what does it mean when we're given a command from our faith perspective. What does it mean to love your neighbor? It doesn't mean to cause them to assimilate to who you are, right? It's about inviting people of all walks of life into community, because it's the same thing that we got to eat today, right? I had veggie vegetable soup. Anybody have that? It's pretty good, right? It had a medley of different vegetables in it that brings out the flavor and provides the nourishment that we need. And I just want to encourage you that as you're thinking this through, go out and visit in the communities you find yourself to get to know your neighbors in a different way, especially in our current climate. We have to be advocates, which means we need to over-communicate our love and our respect and our hope for our communities in a way that we may not regularly do that. So, our board made a decision with some nudging of myself to take a chance on what it looks like to expand. And I had so many people say, man, we don't have enough. We don't have enough people, we don't have enough relationships, we don't have enough. And I'm like, that's, operating from a position of scarcity, right? And Scripture tells us that we should be the opposite of that, right? We should always operate from a position of knowing that God's going to provide for us. And I'm a big believer that when we step out and demonstrate an active presence of love, which means taking care of others before I take care of myself, that road and that pathway for that will automatically be built. It'll be pretty apparent. And so that's kind of what it looks like to step out in faith. If I'm trying to bridge to, the social work that I do versus the how faith becomes alive in a community. And so lo and behold, the board got behind this and said, yeah, let's jump on board, let's go. Let's do this. And we made a commitment to reach more youth. Now, to give you a little bit of idea of what we have with our clubs in High Point, we serve now, we've grown to almost 2,000 kids that we're serving annually. And you all are a part of that work. It's just not the out-of-school time work that happens during the school year, but the summer programming, the summer camps that happen in the summers when kids are here from 8:30 till 5 o'clock. And we may be, in most instances, the best part of their day. And so it's been tough. For the past 2 weeks, we've not had any kids in our clubs. And so we've had our club directors calling and checking on kids and families and figuring out what their needs are and just being mindful that some of those kids are not in really good situations right now. So when we decided to think about expansion, you cannot expand without having a really solid foundation to build on. And so over the first, gosh, Tom, it feels like I've been here for 10 years and it's been 8 months, right? Over the course of 8 months, we've restructured the organization. We've got a bunch of policies and procedures in place, revamped our programming to meet the needs of communities. I come from an education background and even my influence of how I got into this work around the importance of education. So 3rd grade reading proficiency is essential. Because if a kid's not able to read by 3rd grade, so you're learning to read, and then from 4th grade on, you're reading to learn. And so if you don't have the proficiency in reading, it starts to, the divide starts happening, and fewer and fewer kids are able to graduate high school or even have a chance to get to college. And so that's a pretty important piece. Math proficiency is an important piece. Exposing kids to STEM and STREAM activities to help them dream beyond their current circumstances of what they want to do, what school they want to attend, what career they may want to go into. Maybe, school may not be for everybody. So what does it look like to think about trade opportunities and equipping kids in all these ways? So we revamped all of that and cast a pretty big vision to reach a significant number of kids. And so across the triad, there are about 125,000 kids that fall into our age range. That's from 6 years old until 18 years old. Of those 125,000 kids across the triad, which by the way is Greater Triad, it's not just High Point, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro. It's 10 cities, and I'm not going to list them all out because I get them wrong, but it's Asheboro, of course, already has a club. But then on top of that, Thomasville, Kernersville, Burlington, Gibsonville, Graham. The list goes on, which means that we'll be the largest geographic area of Boys and Girls Club in the state of North Carolina in 5 years. We've got the largest territory. We're not serving the same number of kids. But moving from serving 2,000 kids a year to closer to 10,000 kids a year. So just serving the kids that we have right now, we have a staff of about 120 people. About 24 of those are full-time, the rest are part-time. And then during the school year, we ramp up and increase our part-time staff because we have teachers that teach specific literacy and math and our STEM. So imagine this, if we're going to move from serving almost 2,000 kids to almost 10,000 kids, what kind of infrastructure is required to support an organization of that size? And then how do you make it sustainable? And there's a reason why I'm telling you this, okay? So we're going to shift from about a $3.2 million annual budget to about a $15 million annual budget in 5 years. And that means shifting from 5 to 6 locations to 25 to 30 locations in that same time period. Now, if you think about that numbers-wise, that means that we will have one of the largest we'll employ a significant number of people in the triad to do that work, somewhere between 650 to 750 people to serve that many kids. And that's without tapping into the volunteer base that we need. So I know I'm meshing a bunch of things together, Chris. You sent me 4 questions, and I'm kind of weaving some answers to all these. But I want to try to also help you all think about your leadership shift at the same time. There's a reason why I'm kind of going down this road. So to reach more people, what do you have to think about? How do we prepare ourselves to welcome more people into that work? And when I say work, that's what I would expect that you all, that's how I want to encourage you to think about your transition. In other words, we're not hiring the best, I'm not a part of the church, so y'all are not hiring the best pastor to come in here and to entertain you on Sunday mornings and to lead some periodic programs throughout the week. I would imagine that's not the case. But in our culture, churches used to be the center of the community and used to be the rally point for everyone to want to participate in, to make sure everybody was taken care of, and that everybody was seen and welcome and heard. And that's the same thing that we try to do in the Boys and Girls Club. And so I still feel like that I'm living out the calling that I felt upon my life, that just maybe was maybe moving at a different pace and in a different direction than when I was within the church. So if I'm going to invite people in to clubs, we have to have the right kind of programming. We have to have the right kind of measurements. How do we know that we're actually moving the needle? How do we want to fund this? How are we going to sustain this for years and years and years to come? And so you have to move from in my case, we have to move the board from a transactional mindset to a relational philanthropic mindset. What that means is, instead of writing a bunch of grants and getting people to give us money, and then we tell them, yeah, we're doing good, or we're trying, right? To move it away from that to being in relationship with our funders in a manner that we're aligning with their philanthropic goals, that they're trying to make a significant change in the community. And I've told this to Tom, and we've talked about this to the board. If you take all the bells and whistles away from the Boys and Girls Club of the Greater Triad, and you remove all the programming, the logos, the buildings, the people, all the writing that we do, everything, you take all that stuff away. The bottom line of what we're trying to do is to interrupt generational poverty and to give kids and families economic mobility for the future so that it changes their trajectory, right? And I would imagine that that's a pretty important goal for the church. And you all do some of that work already. You invite people in, you feed our kids, you feed our families, and that's and that's in addition to the 48,000 meals that we provided this past year to our kids, which is a significant amount. So if you think about programs and you think about filling the need and filling the gap, I want you to consider those elements. Positive social change means not just putting a Band-Aid on something. It means systematically changing the circumstances through a number of activities that could even increase or change policy and help illuminate the challenges in the community so that even our political advocates in our communities know what the decisions that they need to make in High Point, right? And so I find myself in those settings quite frequently. As the main voice for the Boys and Girls Club, I'm speaking to political decision makers in the cities that I'm in, whether that's with the cities themselves or even the law enforcement officials, as to what the needs are and how can we collaborate with you to help meet these needs. And that informs how they make decisions and change policy or advocate for certain policies, right? And the church should be illuminating the things that they're doing in communities that create that same sense of awareness. Does that make sense? All right, I've talked a bunch and said a lot, and probably more than you've asked me to, in trying to bring these, what you're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to accomplish together. But I'll say this before Tom comes up and grabs the mic. So he's got a song that he's going to sing. Yeah, we've got a big lift ahead of us. And by casting a big, bold vision, we've generated a level of excitement that people want to actively get involved in. And that's not just the people that were already in our organizations, it's people that now want to work for our organizations, and it's people that want to partner with our organizations. It's the funders that said, okay, if you're this serious, then I want to move my gift from $25,000 to $500,000. It's that kind of things that happen when you get serious about changing the circumstances of the world in our own little slice or slither of a place to do that. So I want you to think big, prepare, and then if you're worried about how it's going to be executed, you're going to attract the right kind of people to be involved in doing it. You want to do something?
I was going to make a point about our journey in High Point. And so one of the fears of expansion was whenever High Point gets mentioned with Greensboro and Winston-Salem, we're last. Every program that goes on gets started over in Greensboro, and High Point gets kicked off to the side eventually. And so initially we said no. We didn't think we didn't have a CEO then either. We're in the same process as we are here in the church. And then we had a mind shift was, we have a successful thing going in High Point, which you've all been part of and feel and know about it. Let's take that and then let's lead. High Point never leads. And so that's what we're doing. We decided to lead this effort versus it's going to happen with or without us, and we didn't want to be left behind. So, is that?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. It is a big deal. It is a big deal that, and fortunate enough for me, I had done something similar in the city of Northwest where I brought together 3 conferences that said they'd never worked together, and had been, they'd been opposite of each other for decades. And then 6 months into that long decision to work together, they were like, "Why didn't we start doing this 20 years ago?" Hey, that's a great idea, right? Why didn't we do it 20 years ago? But this is, in this instance, with bold vision, and this is, when I say the leadership, I'm talking about the board. It's probably the most engaged board I've ever been involved in 25 years of leading nonprofits. And I've seen some messes. This board is a very active board, and they care about their community, and they care about the Boys and Girls Club. And so, just by virtue of saying, okay, if we're leading this movement, we are not going to get sidelined in the narrative. We're going to be at the tip of the spear. We're going to control the pace at which we move. We're going to determine how the programs get implemented, and we're going to control who serves on the board and those kind of pieces, right? But you want to do that with humility, and you want to do that with an invitation for others to be involved and be around the table. And that's the posture that we've taken in High Point to set the stage for this expansion. And just to quote David Congdon, who the Congdon family is our largest supporters, they was like, "This is a big deal for High Point to be leading this initiative." And again, it's going to be the largest. We will be the largest club in the state of North Carolina from a regional perspective. We may be the largest in the state, but I'm giving credit to Charlotte because of the population density down there. They had no clubs, and they may serve more kids in that area just because of that. But we will be the largest geographic area and may serve, I'm pretty competitive, we'll serve more kids than Charlotte.